Hey guys, it's Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, and I'm here with Margaret from MODVEGAN.
Hello.
And today we just wanted to talk a little bit about privilege and if it makes you privileged to be a minimalist or a vegan or interested in zero waste. So I find, as a vegan, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, people really like to bring up the idea that veganism is for people who are privileged.
And it is, in a way. I mean, that's one of those things that's hard because it is kind of true. Like, it tends to be something that is more associated with people who are, from a certain sort of background, and that is something that's brought up, and there is some truth to that you do find more white middle class people who are vegan and things like that, and that tends to be what's represented both online and in the media, and that is somewhat problematic.
Yeah. Do you think that there are some real barriers to veganism for those who are less privileged, or is it sort of a perception issue?
I think it depends. I did a video recently where I was talking about Gary Francione's video that he made about dumpster diving and veganism. And it was interesting because I've gotten lots of comments since then from other people about it, because I said, what we should be very careful about, because, he's coming from a place of privilege. I'm now coming from a place of privilege as well. When we criticize people who may not be in the position where they are able to eat what we eat and things like that we just need to be more sensitive about it. And I do think that is something that vegans could definitely stand to do more.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. I think people have a pretty strong impression that veganism is sort of an elite lifestyle, and that to be vegan you have to be able to afford to buy fancy, mock meats, and you have to be able to afford to get all of the special seasonings and packaged products and things like that. Whereas in a lot of ways, veganism can be really conducive to someone who is on a lower income, because a lot of those plant foods and the grains and all of those staple foods can be very affordable. But I think that doesn't get put out there nearly as much as the sort of aspirational vegan life and wanting to have all those extra things. So it can be hard for people to see themselves in veganism.
Yeah, and I think there's not enough focus on that in the vegan community as well. If we look at social media, there is a lot of it that is very aspirational and is less accessible to people who are not in positions of privilege. Even when it just comes down to what to buy, what to cook, things like that. I really appreciate the channel Cheap Lazy Vegan, which I just found out recently. She's also from Calgary. Yeah,
amazing. I just discovered her.
I just found that out too. Someone pointed out to me that she's actually in Calgary as well. But it's so nice that there is somebody out there trying to show that you can do this without spending tons of time, that you can do it affordably, because that's often not the way that it's portrayed. Yeah. And I do think that can be a problem. And it's interesting. I've noticed for my family, we've spent way less money since we went vegan on food. We used to spend a lot more, and that's probably because we're buying more, organic, free-range meat and things like that before we went vegan, and so that obviously is quite expensive. But even compared with that, like now we shop at a store here in town called Superstore. It's Canadian. So if you're in Canada, you know what that is. It's kind of like almost like a Canadian Costco-ish Walmart type thing. It's kind of like in between those things. But one thing I find is that the one that we go to it's kind of in the northeast here in Calgary, which tends to be a more heavily populated by immigrants area of town. That's just the way it is in Calgary. And I find that the food there is very affordable, and especially the vegan food. Like that's where you buy, dried beans in bulk and things like that. And part of it is just, learning how to shop for those kind of things. And I think that some of us don't know how to do it. It's interesting, in Canada, a lot of the immigrant communities are much better at knowing how to cook with those foods because they come from those countries in the first place. My kids go to Chinese school, and a lot of the families there have found a way to make it very affordable to eat plant-based foods. Of course, they eat meat as well, but they make that the base of their meals so that they can make it affordable.
Yeah, I think learning how to cook foods that are not convenience foods is a big part of it too, because I know when I first moved out of my house and I had no money when I was in college, all I would buy are convenience foods and things I could heat up because I didn't know how to make real food. I would make grilled cheese and stuff. And then when I went vegan, I realized I didn't know how to cook, and I couldn't afford to buy pre-made, vegan chicken nuggets that I could just throw in the microwave. I'd get them as a treat, but I could not afford to.
Yeah, and they're so much more expensive than everything else is too. Yeah. Vegan convenience foods are not cheap. No. So when people are thinking about vegan food being expensive, that seems to be the main thing that they're looking at is vegan.
If you're gonna get tofurkey something every night, that's expensive for sure. But it took so much time for me to figure out how do you even cook dry beans, and how do I cook rice and I don't burn it or it's not raw. The things that are really basic skills that a lot of people just don't have now. But when you are making those really basic meals with those more sort of staple foods, then they can be incredibly affordable, which is amazing if you are struggling with, having enough income to feed yourself well. Then eating more of a plant-based diet can sort of be the answer to that, to get all your nutrients without having to spend a crazy amount of money. But
have you found any good resources for that sort of thing that are helpful for finding ways to do it more affordably? And also, I noticed, I've seen Black Vegans Rock is a really good website for some of the just dealing with the issues of being in the inner city with poverty, with lack of privilege and things like that. There's some resources like that at least kind of address those things so that you don't feel insanely alienated if, for example, you maybe live in assisted living, or you live in some place where you're dependent on other people, or you have no access to transportation and things like that, because that's an issue. And one thing that I just think vegans need to be careful about is this assumption that everyone can be vegan, because it's not necessarily true. And I mean, I think from a health perspective, it's probably more true that everyone can be vegan. And I've actually, when I heard Dr. Esselstyn speaking here in Calgary, that's the thing he mentioned, like that. And if someone like him thinks that pretty much everyone can be vegan, it's probably true. But that's not the only issue. It's not just about health. It's also about where you live.
The access.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally agree with that. I used to say, everyone can be vegan and vegan is easy were things that I would always say. And to a certain extent, I still believe those things, but I think that it's a little bit detrimental to say them just to anybody without really considering the situations of other people. And I think, something I try to say now is veganism is not always easy, and it's not doable for everyone. But it is a lot easier than people think it is.
Yeah.
Because people have this, it's a monolith, it's impossible for them to change, to do this, but it's not, but it is also not easy or possible for everyone in their current situation, and that's okay. That doesn't make them a bad person or make veganism impossible for everyone. It just means
and I think it's problematic the way that vegans think that that's incredibly rare, because I get those comments from people where they say, everyone can go vegan, and if there's someone who can't, they're just this rare, unusual case. And I know that's not true, because I'm one of the great things about having a YouTube channel is you get messages from people, and I've had letters from people who have disabilities and things like that, who actually are being cared for by family members, and they want to go vegan and they can't because their families just do not support them in it. And just to say to that person that it's easy is not true, and it's not helpful. Like, they want to change, and I think that's where you have to focus, not just on changing that individual, but changing the whole culture. Like, that's where we have to try and reach out to make it easier for everyone to eat that way. And work on it instead of focusing on other people's mistakes and going after people who are dumpster diving and criticizing them. How about you help out in your community? If that's upsetting you, then why don't you donate vegan items to your local food bank and things like that? Like, I think those are things that we need to be doing, focusing less on other people's failings and more on changing the system, changing the world, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and supporting those organizations that are trying to help people who are in, those less privileged positions, people who are struggling with poverty, who can, help them to eat more plant-based foods. There's a organization in Toronto, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I'll put it somewhere here, that has been serving vegan meals to the homeless in Toronto for years and years.
Is this Food Not Bombs, or is this something else? Because I know there's one in the US called Food Not Bombs. At least I think it's in the US.
It's the Toronto Food something.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, but they've been serving, so many healthy plant-based meals to people in Toronto who are either the homeless population or people who are struggling to make ends meet, or they can't manage to feed themselves, and just offering free meals that are plant-based, that are healthy, and educating them on more of plant-based nutrition and why they should care about it. And all these people who want to be vegan, you hear stories from the man who started the organization, and he says, there are so many people who want to do this, who care about the ethics, they understand what it's like to be ignored, to be oppressed, and they care, and they don't have the means to do it. They have to eat what they can get, or they can only afford to buy whatever it is that they are currently eating, but they want to do that.
Exactly.
They need that support to do it.
And that's where I think, it just helps to, I made a video recently about this, like we just need to think as positively as we can about people, try to give them the benefit of the doubt, try to encourage them, try to give them the assistance that you can instead of just criticizing them. And I think that's one of the few real legitimate criticisms of the vegan community. That is a legitimate criticism, that we do a lot of preaching and we don't do that much actual action. And of course, also when you have a YouTube channel, you're doing a lot of preaching, but we also want to take that opportunity whenever we can to do something that is actually going to be helping people and reaching out and giving people that assistance that they need.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one way that I've sort of shifted the way that I talk to people about this that I feel has helped is when I'm saying something about transitioning to veganism, I try to talk about my experience solely. I try not to extrapolate that to everyone else. I try to not, say that it's going to be easy for you, but I say, this is what was hard for me, this is what I struggled with, and this is what I found easier than I expected. And the more I talk about my own experience, they can relate to what they relate to and not relate to what they don't relate to. But at least I'm not saying this is how it's going to be for you and just assuming that that's what their life is like. I get to say, this is exactly how it was for me, and this is the situation I was in at the time. And I feel like people appreciate that, even if they don't consciously recognize that that's what you're doing, because you're not prescribing.
Yeah, well, it's the same as basic psychology. You tell someone, this is how this makes me feel, instead of you need to do this, or.
Yeah. But it really works. I feel like it makes a big difference to how receptive someone is to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, maybe basic psychology is something all vegans should try and brush up on a little bit. Especially online vegans, we could use a little bit of that.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please go check out Margaret's channel. She has a video going up that we've done together, so go check it out. And where can they find you?
MODVEGAN here on YouTube, and at the MODVEGAN on Twitter, and all sorts of other places. Yeah, check me out here on YouTube and you'll find all the links there.
Yeah, I'll leave all the links in the description box. Go check her out. If you enjoy my channel, you're gonna love her channel as well, so go subscribe, and I'll see you guys really soon in my next video. Bye guys.